Maloney Bhatt. It is estimated that by the year 2030, 12 million Indian women will have lost jobs due to digital transformation and automation. This is from a report by ORF, the think tank. There is another data point. Women account for about 10% of the jobs, but they accounted for 23% of the jobs lost a year after COVID hit India. Now, this is from the Center for Monitoring the Indian Economy. Women have always faced challenges when it has come to jobs and employment, be it unpaid labor, be it issues of access to learning and to technology, be it lack of mobility, be it lack of agency. And this has all been exacerbated by COVID. In the ET Prime Women Leadership Awards, we're asking, can skilling and reskilling stem the job losses where women are concerned and get them ready for future work? And who better to tell us this than Ruhi Ranjan? She is an MD of Accenture. We have with us Mr. Raghav Gupta. He is the MD of Coursera, India and APAC. And we have Neeraj Garg, CEO of Hindustan Coca-Cola Beverages. Thank you very much all for joining us. Raghav, I wanted to begin with you. Coursera's Women in Skills Report 2021 indicates that the gender gap in online learning narrowed, but the gender employment gap widened. Can you take us through some of the numbers?
Yeah, absolutely, Maloney. Happy to be here and happy to get us started on this conversation, which I think is a very important topic. So like you said, we've seen a little bit of a paradox, right? We've seen the number of working women globally as well as in India reduce in 2020 compared to 2019. The ILO puts a number on this and about 13, 14 million women went out of jobs, right? And largely the reasons for this, schools shut down, kids were at home, families were at home, and a lot of that workload came on women and many of them ended up going out of their jobs. That's the negative part of the results that we've seen. On the other side, what we've seen on our platform, on Coursera, which is a fairly large platform, we've been looking at data around how trends in women's learning on our platform have been shaping up. And to give you a sense, this is a fairly large data set because globally there are upwards of 85 million learners on the Coursera platform. And in India, there are close to 13 million learners on our platform. So this is a large data set. And the good news has been that the number of women pursuing learning on the Coursera platform went up between 2019 to 2020. And the number of women learning STEM subjects specifically, so technology, science, engineering related subjects, also went up. And also this went up in 2020 and it has sustained in 2021 as well. So it seems like a sustainable kind of a trend. And if I were to put some quick numbers around it, we saw in India that in 2019, 26% of the courses taken on the Coursera platform used to be from women. It went up to 35% last year. It's up at about 36% this year. So we saw that, growth happening. And then in technology subjects, in STEM subjects, pre-pandemic, it used to be 23%. And last year it went up to 32% and it sustained at 32%. So more women are home, they've lost jobs, but they're also very actively learning and they're also very actively learning in technology, which I think is a positive sign that we've seen. And those are some of the high level, I would say, outcomes that this report is showing us, which I think are interesting for us to talk about.
Right. Neeraj, what do you make of this dichotomy? Women are skilling, upskilling, reskilling, but they're falling off the jobs ladder. What's happening?
So, Maloney, it's very interesting that people are reskilling and falling off the job ladder because as Raghav talked about, the opportunities are fewer and we are also seeing a lot more challenges come on to the women, right? People are working from home. That means that there are more responsibilities that they need to take care of. Children are there, parents are there, and that becomes a challenge for the women. At Hindustan Coca-Cola, actually, what we've tried to do to ensure that is twofold, One, of course, is that we've tried to make sure that we have people who are more multi-skilled, especially women. Because what happens is that with the COVID guidelines, you cannot call everybody to work. We've had a factory running throughout the pandemic, but the number of people who can come to the plant are fewer. So actually the upskilling and multi-skilling allows us to ensure that we are able to provide opportunities for people to continue to work. And through a rotation system, we made sure that we've actually not lost any people because of the pandemic closure. The other piece of this is that you've got to change the mindset of the society, the community, and within yourself. Because what happens is, if there is a challenge related to the family, and the going in assumption or the one that you lead in with is the woman's going to take care of the problem while I'll take care of everything outside, then of course you will have women falling off the job tree, right? And what we try to do is create policies within the organization that encourage people to understand that it's the full family that needs to take responsibility, not just the woman. And also through our community outreach programs, which have been encouraged women to come to work, we've tried to show to the communities that we work with and partner with that we can actually make a difference. It's a safe place to work. And that's also helping to shape some of the ideas and notions which have been set in society. And that is what is truly helping us. So there is a dichotomy. The reasons are there because of not finding an enabling ecosystem that allows women to continue working. And we as an organization, which have a large footprint in manufacturing across the country, we are actually working towards ensuring that we create that enabling ecosystem for women to continue working. And that really is the gap, I think, that we need to address.
Ruhi Ranjan, if I can come to you, what are some of the models when it comes to skilling and reskilling that are coming into play at organization levels?
I think just let me give you a backdrop of what is, as a firm, as Accenture, we do for skilling. And I think for us, it's a way of life. There's a very specialized team of experts which continuously evaluates the skill requirement of our people, irrespective of the gender. And they run complex algorithms to figure out, what is the data telling us about specialization for our population and, degree of specialization for a given population. Not just that, we also use a tool called as a Next Gen Horizon Skills tool, which actually helps us come out with a very data-based strategy for driving skills which are going to be applied in the market. And when we look at the data coming in from market trends on skilling requirements and overlap with the demand trend in Accenture, we actually put the skill requirements in 5 or 4 different buckets. And I'll just quickly touch upon them because it will help you understand the scale of effort which goes in trying to create the right skills for our clients and for Accenture within as well. So there are skills which we term as emerging skills. These are the skills, which are new on the horizon, and this is about 1 to 5 years, and they will mature over a period of time. And it gives us a signal that, this is coming our way. We should start, working towards creating a workforce which is going to be aligned to these skills. Then you have something called as aligned to market, where we've already invested in the skills. We have internally created those skills. And the market trends also show us that this is a requirement in the market, and we continue investing in it. There are some skills which we call as missed opportunity skills, where, while we have those skills internally within the organizations, we've kind of slowing down on creating them. But the market trends are telling us otherwise. And this tells us that we need to reinvest and start looking at creating these skills again. And then the 4th bucket is actually called as the reconsider strategy skills, which is where, we have got a lot of people on those skills, but the market trends tells us that, this skill is not going to be required in large numbers in the future. And therefore, it's an opportunity for us to pick up our people and retrain them and reskill them. And then the last bucket is actually skills in complete decline, where, it tells us that these skills are not going to be required in the market anymore. And therefore, we need to really proactively start locking this down. Accenture as an organization is very focused on creating a skilled workforce globally. And we have a huge spend, nearly $1 billion we spent, $1 billion we spend every year in creating a very holistic, individualistic program for our employees. And, I know that Raghav is here and Neeraj is here. And most of the global organizations tie up with institutes globally to be able to do that. And so does Accenture. So we've got some very, very, strong partnerships with like institutes like Aaron Turing Institute for top data and AI skills, MIT for, technology skills, and Berkeley Institute for data science. We continue to leverage these institutes to be able to add to our skill bucket. Coming back to your earlier question, and I was actually glad that Raghav's, report really does indicate that their women are coming back and learning, and especially on the STEM skills, which is where, organizations like ours are very keen. And I feel that, technology can be a great enabler for women. And therefore, our focus is how do we enable the workforce that we have today to have the skills, especially women. So when the right opportunity comes up, those roles are available for women. And therefore, we've been focused on creating and curating programs across levels for our women to harness this power of technology. And one such program, which I can very proudly talk about, is called as Grow Women in Leadership program, which is targeted at mid to senior level of women, where women have the technology prowess. They have proved themselves to be great technologists, but we augmented by giving them strong leadership skills, so that when they get into those roles at leadership levels, which is where a lot of gap in our gender parity exists, women can go ahead and pick up those roles. And this is a 5.5-month program, and we've curated the content to align it to what the women, how we can grow women to take these as future roles. And we are very pleased to say that we were recently acknowledged by Brennan Hall Excellence Awards as for this particular initiative as saying the best advancement in leadership technology development. Melanie.
Only if I may quickly add one quick point to what was just shared, and I would echo what Ruhi said as well, but very quickly, I know you have more questions for us. The World Economic Forum put out a research report which said globally we are going to see 85 million losses by 2025. And many of these are in the traditional sectors. Coincidentally, Microsoft put out a research report which says there will be 150 million new jobs created by 2025 in digital job categories. And these digital job categories are, software development, cloud, cybersecurity, data, and so on. Out of those 150 million jobs that will get created, 30 million are expected to happen in India. And so, just coming back to this point that Ruhi shared as well, which is technology is a great enabler. And what I was mentioning about women skilling towards STEM subjects on the Coursera platform as well, they're completely aware that that's where the digital job opportunities are opening up. And while many women did go back, and left jobs, I think they're essentially getting ready for what the future holds in store for all of us as well.
I'm going to come back to this technology being an enabler part, but rather what I wanted to also ask you very quickly is if you could give us a profile of the women who are on the platform, or where are these and the courses that they're taking. You say that they focus on STEM courses, but can you give us a brief insight about whether these women are in jobs currently, whether, what is their age group? Are they in our villages? Are they in our cities? Who are these women? Very briefly.
Yeah, I love talking about data and the insights that it gives us, right? So there are close to 50 lakh women that learn on the Coursera platform. The average age, or I should say the median age, is 27. It's not different from men in India who are, at a median age of 27 as well. It is younger than the rest of the world, which is not surprising given, younger population. So globally, it is 32. In India, it is 27. But what is interesting is that the top skills that women learn on the Coursera platform, and the number one is computer programming, number two is machine learning, number three is probability, number four is computer science, number five is communication. And also, that being said, right, I'm looking at the top courses that women take, and they take courses related to these subjects. But the fourth most popular course on Coursera in India is the Science of Well-being from Yale University. So good combination of digital, but also human skills, if you will. And, 50 lakh women. So these are great candidates for both Neeraj and Ruhi's companies to possibly, hire as well in the future. A lot of these, women on our platform are, in different parts of the country as well, right? So the largest number of women learners come from Maharashtra, Karnataka, Tamil Nadu, Delhi NCR, and Uttar Pradesh. which is not surprising given, level of urbanization and large populations in these states. But where we saw the largest amount of growth is very interesting. So we saw 500 plus growth, 500% plus growth in Nagaland, 400% in Manipur, Bihar, Andamans, and Kerala. So we've seen this explosion in being able to reach, smaller cities, smaller towns, and provide high quality education. And the other interesting element is upwards of 62% of this learning is happening on a mobile device, right? Not everybody will have access to a laptop or to a tablet, but lots of people have access to a phone at least, and a lot of that is happening on those devices, which I think are really, really positive trends that we are seeing.
So most of these women who are logging on, are they in urban centers?
So it's a mix, where we see some of these larger states. So in, Delhi or in Maharashtra, these are the larger cities. But when you look at some of the numbers that I was sharing, they're coming from Bihar, they're coming from Nagaland, from Manipur, they are coming from smaller centers as well, smaller cities, smaller towns as well. So it's a good mix across the country that we are seeing.
Neeraj, as someone, who is a leader in FMCG goods, manufacturing, what do you make of the data that Raghav has just put out for us? What does this tell you about women in work and the choices that they're making and, mapping it to say 5 years from now?
So one thing is that we really see a bright future, for the entire population in India, especially for women. Especially, when you start looking 10, 20 years down the road with the skilling coming in, it is going to make a big difference. As an organization, we inherently believe in the value having a gender diverse workforce brings to the company. You get better insights, you're able to get better planning, you're able to get a more balanced point of view. And you're able to really think of the new environment that you want to create for the organization. And the big thing for me is, Rui and Raghav talked about the way the skilling is happening. For us, it's really critical that it happens where our footprint is. We set up our plants more into the outside the urban zones. Khurda, for example, in Bhubaneswar, where I am today, which is, an hour away from the city. And what is important for us is that we are able to truly impact the community and the workforce in that area to make the difference. One of the things I talked about was how we've been able to maintain continuity in our business and retain the women workforce is the concept of multi-skilling and upskilling. So in Sanand, which is a digital enabled factory, we've been able to get 86% of a women workforce, which actually can do 2 to 3 jobs versus being hired only for one role. So, in a time of pandemic, when you want to bring social distancing, you're able to get those people to manage the line and do it. Even in Khurda, which is a 21-year-old plant, what I'm seeing is that when I talk about at least 2 skills being learned, it's almost 100% of the plant force. And if you talk about 3 different jobs that they can do, it's about 35% of the workforce. So that for us is the key piece that we've been able to make a change over the last 2 years, which is helping us ensure that we have the right mix of workforce and we are able to support the women folk. And just going back to what I was talking about, the community intervention. When we first set up the plant in Sanand and we wanted to get a diverse workforce, there was a myth that women cannot operate on the shop floor. Physical labor is a big challenge, and even the environment is not safe for them. And to be able to use digital technology and to make sure that, we can talk about people becoming computer programmers and software. But for us, the importance of digital intervention is on how it makes people's life easier in the common routine job that they need to do. And we had the first, operator for our forklifts. The Plasmac machine, which is a fairly complex machine, requires a lot of effort. We had the first operator for that. And that all happened because we reached out to the community, got them to understand through sabhas, to working with the panchayat, to understand the safe environment we were creating, inviting them to the shop floor to see the working environment and making a difference. So technology is an enabler. It's a critical enabler, but we also need to make sure that we continue to impact the way people think and how we bring that all together to keep the continuum going. So absolutely, the data shows it's going to be a great future for the women in India.
Right. Ruhi, if I can come to you, women are, we know that, organizations that invest in skilling are going to be winning organizations. You know, we're going to be able to attract good talent, we will retain good talent, hopefully we'll be able to keep the women talent. But will skilling and reskilling help us bridge the gender pay gap? I mean, that gap is really not, being bridged.
I think
I also want to bring in that here everything is an attempt by women. So women have to reskill, women have to upskill. You know, yes, I'm sure there are enabling organizations that back women and help them, but it's almost like they've got to tick all of these boxes.
yes, I completely agree with that thought, Miloni, because it's been a long journey, right? And the data proves it that women are more vulnerable to job losses. And you would have seen that in the pandemic has impacted women significantly more than it has impacted men. Women had ended up losing jobs far greater in numbers, right? And I was looking at the data, 70% of the women actually lost their jobs because they were in sectors which were very unorganized. So how do we, the challenge is how do we upskill these women and get them into an organized center? And, I'm glad that Neeraj is saying that where we are setting up factories, we're setting up manufacturing units which will allow these women to come in and have a vocation, whether it's in manufacturing, whether it is on technology. I think it's very important that we create this ecosystem which is safe, the environment which is safe, and allow women to have a vocation which gets them the right kind of remuneration. Pay gap is a long way away, right? What you're talking about is not going to happen that quickly because we have a huge gap, especially in our country, if you look at it, to cover. And it will continuously come over if we as individuals, we as leaders start focusing on it, right? And while there is opportunity immense for us to get women to be trained, get them to be reskilled, I think it has to also be thought in the circumstances of the last 18 months, right? Where people are now beginning to look at coming back to work. How are we going to enable that workforce to acquire these skills, because they were the ones who lost their jobs? So it has to be bite-sized, it has to be enabled on digital platforms like what Raghav said, right? And I'm delighted that there's so many women who are picking up technology as a skill because that's the forte that I work in. But we also have to make a very significant impact of bringing them back to work. So women who've lost their jobs, whether they've been in an airline industry, the travel and retail industry, which has been which has been significantly impacted. How do we encourage those women to come back? And once they come back, start reskilling themselves. So I think the organizations are going to carry a lot of responsibility. And the focus by NASSCOM is on reskilling, right? You've seen the whole, campaign being launched by NASSCOM is just in that direction to say, how can we reskill our women and men to find vocations which are going to be creating jobs of the future? So my first focus would be to get women back into work, right? People who've been displaced, people who've lost their jobs. And secondly is, look at how do we encourage more women to come to the pay gap and pay gap parity, Miloni.
Right. I want to touch upon this technology bit because all of you have spoken about how technology is a huge enabler. But from what I have also seen is that technology can divide, and it can divide very sharply. For instance, in the pandemic, a lot of girls had to drop off from schools because they did not have access to mobile phones, right? The phone was then given to the brother so that the brother could attend the school, and they lost out. So Raghav, specifically to you, what are your thoughts on this? That yes, technology can enable your entire platform, is allowing women, which maybe a couple of years back, they might have not had that kind of opportunity. But technology is also not so widespread in a country like India, where smartphone usage is low, and even internet connectivity may be very, very low. How do we do this?
Yeah. Like you said, technology is an enabler, but it can also be a divider. But before I talk about technology, right, there's merit in just stepping back for a moment, because technology is one part of the puzzle. I think the challenge for education in India is the larger, puzzle here. I don't know if many people realize this, but in our country, 1 in 4 students coming out of class 12 gets to go to college, right? 1 in 4 students gets to go to college. And of those that get to go to college, how good is the quality of that education that you receive is the other big question. And then the third big question is, even if you're receiving quality education, is that getting you ready for careers of the future, right? So I think the big challenge around education is, can we firstly make education, higher education, engaging, high quality, job relevant? Can you get a credential, a degree which matters, which industry recognizes and says that, look, what you've learned is meaningful? So I think all of that needs to be solved for. The technology part of it definitely needs to be solved for as well, right? And yes, at least companies like us don't have a solution which is independent of a device, right? So at least a laptop or a tablet or a mobile will be needed. The government has launched programs where education is available via TV channels and so on and so forth. The Ministry of Education has done that. But within the ambit of saying, look, in technology, if you say that, look, at least you need a smartphone to be able to study, there are certain technology-led solutions that we've launched, right? So, for example, the largest amount of bandwidth that you need for education is if you're doing a Zoom class and you're doing it live, right? Because that's when you need the highest broadband, and if you miss it, you miss the class. We've made this possible in an offline manner. So if you can't attend a class live, you can come to Coursera, and like you would do on Netflix or Amazon Prime, you can download a class when you're online and you can view it. And then the other thing that we've done is 90% of our content is available on a mobile device. There are close to 7,000 courses, projects on Coursera, but everything has been optimized so that it can almost be taken on a mobile device. And then, there are situations when even internet connectivity will fluctuate. So can you download low resolution? Can you download only audio versions only, and so on and so forth? So technology can help there to an extent, but yeah, I don't think there's a solution which is independent of a device being available to an individual. And I think what you laid out at the start, that the boy gets the phone and the girl doesn't, that's a larger societal, challenge for all of us that we need to solve for in any case. One bright spark, I would say, to close this particular topic is, we serve two kinds of learners: working professionals and students in campuses. And the number of women who are, or girls who are on campuses, who are on the Coursera platform, is much larger. So there seem to be a lot of women students who are getting to learn on the Coursera platform. And as that goes through the pipe and they come into careers, then I think that could be a possible positive sign for all of us.
Right. Neeraj, for you, I want to pick up from something that Ruhi said, that there are vulnerable jobs. So how are we training and skilling women for vulnerable jobs? See, automation by 2030, there is an estimate that 12 million women in India will be off jobs because they will be hit by digital transformation and by automation. So there are vulnerable jobs. And you've given us the example of, the forklift operator at the Sanand factory. So manufacturing, of course, is going to create, companies like yours will be creating a lot more jobs. So how are you skilling for vulnerable jobs?
Melanie, for us, actually, the vulnerable jobs which are within the ambit of Hindustan Coca-Cola, that's within our control, right? So it's for us to decide what makes them vulnerable. And truly what's make them vulnerable is the willingness of the person to do the job and their comfort or their ability to use technology to bring productivity and efficiency going forward. So our focus has been around, and not only for the girls and women who work with us, but for the men folk as well, as to provide that environment where people become familiar and comfortable with using technology to work. Now, whether you're working on the factory floor, and I've given the example how now people are now multi-skilled, and that takes care of the fact that if there's one job that's not available, there are other roles that they can get into. For us, what we are trying to do is to ensure a job for the people and not a role. So your role may change, but there is a continuity of employment or the job with the company. Similarly, in the office, walking away from the shop floor, it's all about the ability to work with data, the ability to work with different inputs coming in, truly understanding them and come up with scenarios, use cases, and being able to lead forward. And that's going to be a big, big requirement as the world continues to evolve and technology continues to be a critical enabler for any business or any initiative you take. And there's a lot of focus around that. So I think this is what we can do. And finally, I go back to the fact that it's creating the environment where people believe that's an equal responsibility. So even the policies that we run, Melanie, in the organization, and the work, the outreach program that we do, works around it. So for example, maternity and paternity leave both go hand in hand. We have unlimited sick leave because we understand that at this time and work from home, people do need time because there are more challenges around it. Or the fact that you don't need to work 9 to 5 as you're working from home. You can take an hour off when your kids or your daughter comes home from school, and you do need to spend some time with them and settle them down before you come back to work. So people can choose the times they work and how they do it in coordination with their leader, with their teams, etc. So all this continues to create an environment where you keep reducing the vulnerability of the role, and you make sure that there's a job that you're committed to and you can continue to be part of the ecosystem.
Right. Ruhi, our mantra for 2030, that is core mantra for the Sustainable Development Goals, is no one should be left behind, right? And so if economic growth and the idea of that is to build a fairer world, then it must be inclusive. Is it inclusive right now? Does it include all women? Or, are women really, or it doesn't?
It doesn't. Obviously, it doesn't. That's my point of view. And
what do we do to make it more inclusive?
Yeah, so this whole sustainability development goal and this mantra of saying no one needs to be left behind, right? And I think this should be a war cry for organizations within our country, because this is something which we really have to do, because today women remain underrepresented in formal employment sectors, right? And we talked about it. And the pandemic has just brought this out to much larger fore, right? These inequalities have now started hitting us in the face. Women's earnings have actually fallen 63% faster than men's. And data actually talks about it, which shows that there's been a 16% decline in women incomes compared to just 10% of men. And additionally, about 79% women are more likely to become redundant and laid off because they continue to work in unorganized sector. So this disparity has to change. This has to change, and therefore we have to make a sustainable effort in bringing this back to us. And organizations like Accenture, I think we've driven ourselves with a very top-down approach and saying we are committed to making this happen. Right? What gender balance goals that we are going to talk about. And this has become a business metric that we actually focus on. Business leaders like me are responsible for inclusion and diversity portfolios, because the organization feels that there needs to be a business leader who sits on and chairs these issues and ensures that there are more women in the workforce than they were ever before. So in 2017, we actually took the bold goal of saying by 2025, we would be a gender neutral organization. And I'm glad to say in 2021, we are close to about 46%. So there are 250,000 women in Accenture today, which is really heartening, because slowly and surely, you're making that difference. And the reason I say that, it has to be a focused metric is because I truly believe what gets measured, gets done. And today, Accenture's board is 27% of women. There are 43% women in roles which are revenue generating roles. So this is a heartening metric, which I think we can go forward with and be very conscious that by 2025 or much before that, we would be a gender neutral organization. We would have parity in the roles that we have for men and women. And I think we need to just continue doing what we're doing. And as Raghav said, and as Neeraj very rightly said, right, we have to ensure that we can create safe working environment with longevity. Stop having women in vulnerable sectors which do not have longevity, and once the business shuts down, the women get rolled off. So more sustained effort by industries, by corporates in engaging women in larger numbers, I think will help us, turn this dial very positively.
Neeraj, I want to come to you. It's excellent. I mean, it's really heartening to hear that 46% of Accenture's workforce is women. But let's just be honest, right? Hiring biases when it comes to women, they remain, they're entrenched. Skilling and reskilling may be one of the ways to kind of overcome those biases. How soon, Neeraj, do you see that really happening? From my end, I think it can't happen too soon, but I want to understand from your vantage point, from your perch as a thought leader, What do you make of it as the situation exists in India right now?
So, Rui talked about the fact that no one getting left behind needs to be a war cry. And, that is really, truly a very accurate statement that we truly believe in. I mean, HCCB, we are about 6,500 strong, 16 manufacturing locations across the country. And we were at about 8.5% gender diversity, not a poster child for talking about a diverse organization. Now, with the work that we've done over the last couple of years, with a lot of digital focus and enabling technology to allow us to do that, we've actually moved the needle on an organization base to 12.5%. Sanand, I spoke about, is at 40%. And more than that, we are able to work all 3 shifts. We are now opening a new state-of-the-art factory next month in Raniganj, Siliguri. And there, emboldened by the success of Sanand, we now have a 60% workforce that's going to be women. So these are small steps for us. And what we are now trying to do is get the learnings from there and take them back into our other older plants, like I talked about Khurda today, where multi-skilling is going. So the point I'm making is that, yes, you need to ensure that you continue to build a diverse organization. Absolutely, our ambition is to get to 50% in not so far the future. But you need to be committed to it. You need to create role modeling, keep role modeling the work. And I'll give a quick example about Sanand. When we started, I told you we had to engage with the community, even to let them bring the girls to the shop floor. Today, we are fighting the fact that a lot of our women folks get poached by other factories in the surrounding. Now, for us, that's a great sign of success, because what we have role model has been adopted by a lot of other players in that industrial belt. And clearly the community is now committed to those principles of women getting equal opportunity and getting a chance to, fulfill their life's ambitions. And that is what we want to do, community after community that we interact with. And I think that is what, if everybody does, every company does in India, we'll see a much quicker path to success over here.
Right. Raghav, my last question to you, and then we take closing remarks from everyone. And the question is, what is the scale of skilling that is required in India right now to make a significant dent or difference to women? And secondly, very quickly, if you could tell us, women who want to skill, what are the 2 filters that they should apply before they jump into a course, or they decide to upskill or reskill?
I mean, like anything for us in India, right? The scale will always be large. So the challenge is large as well. And I would include students as well as working professionals, right? When it comes to women, there are 38 million students in higher education in India. All of them need the right kind of education, the job relevant, high quality education. And if you look at white collar workers, and I don't know what the exact number is, but whether it is 30 or 40 million people, and blue collar workers as well. And I think both Neeraj and we have spoken about how technology is changing and there's a lot of reskilling that is required, right? NASSCOM talks about 5-6 million people who work in technology. If you look at banking and financial services, which has gone digital so rapidly in a post-COVID world, there are upwards of 7-8 million people there. So the scale definitely is large. I think to your second point, right, in terms of what should women be keeping in mind when they think about reskilling, what I find interesting is this University of Chicago study, which says that, look, in a digital economy, in a digital world, the jobs where you can work from home have a direct correlation to the level of income that those jobs offer. And so more digital a job, higher are the chances that you can work from home, and higher are the income opportunities in those jobs. And these are jobs in business management, these are jobs in legal, practices, these are jobs in finance and engineering and so on and so forth. So one element I would say is this trend that we've seen where women are learning STEM courses, that should continue, because that points to better economic opportunity. And the second, which applies to all of us as working professionals, is in today's world, becoming a lifelong learner is super critical for all of us. And becoming a lifelong learner doesn't come naturally. It's important to realize that, right? It's like building a muscle. Till you go to the gym for 6 months, you will not build your biceps. So till you put in discipline to become a lifelong learner, you will not become a lifelong learner. And it's as simple as that as well.
Right. Ruhi, final remarks?
I just feel that, organizations have a big challenge today, Rick, because there is so much of change which is happening. You're seeing the change after the post-COVID world. Digitization has taken steam, but I think also the responsibility of building a diverse workforce is extremely important, and a culture of equality, which we've been talking about. So I would just leave with three thoughts that, there could be three things which organizations need to focus on: a bold and a visible leadership commitment on creating a culture of equality, followed by comprehensive actions to ensure that that vision gets to reality, right? It's good to make a commitment, but what actions are being initiated to ensure that the culture of equality remains and is sustained in an organization? And then creating an empowering environment, where you treat each individual to be as an equal. There are no subordinates because of gender. So I think if we could take these three actions and create a organization culture, I think we would make a significant amount of difference in our culture of equality.
That's well put. Neeraj, I'll leave you to tie all of this up together.
Thank you. Rui said it very well, and I won't go into the points. I think those are completely relevant. And we believe that it's our responsibility and it's our commitment to be the role model for this. And we are not doing it to be a poster child, because it just makes great business sense for us. It is the right thing to do because we believe we are going to be sustainable as a company if the communities we work with are sustainable. And women are the secret mantra to make sure that the communities are sustainable. So that is what we do, whether it's a 5x20 program where we work with 20 million women across 5 years to make sure that they are economically empowered and learn how to manage their finances, or whether it is just making sure that women are not applying for a role but a job, which allows them to go and operate in different parts of the organization, or whether it's the career development centers we put up in our community, which continue to work with people who are educated but not employable and make them employable, not only with us, but in the community and the industry at large. I think that's a commitment that we all have to make. And with this, I truly believe that this will not be a point of discussion anymore.
Some very interesting and powerful insights from all of you. Thank you so very much for joining us. Ruhi Ranjan, MD of Accenture, Raghav Gupta, the MD of Coursera, and Neeraj Garg, CEO, HCCB. Thank you very, very much for being a part of this panel. There's lots more on ET Prime Women Leadership Awards. Stay with us.